My name is Amelia. For 10 years, I worked as a landscape architect, not only for wealthy clients but also for my own life. I believed that any space, like any relationship, could be designed, planting seeds of trust, strengthening the soil with shared memories, providing enough light for growth, and weeding out the weeds of petty grievances. Sebastian and I were my main project, my Tuileries garden, my personal Versailles. Perfect symmetry, precise lines, lush, predictable blooms. We lived in Paris, in a spacious apartment overlooking the rooftops of the Marais, and the city itself seemed to be the soundtrack to our perfect life. Sebastian was the center of my world. A successful investment banker, he moved through life with the confidence and grace of a predator. Tall, with dark hair that he artistically tousled and eyes the color of a stormy sky, he had the gift of making anyone feel special. Especially me. Our love story was a classic. A chance meeting in a gallery, a dinner that lasted until dawn, a whirlwind romance, a proposal on the Pont des Arts, and a wedding in a small chateau in Provence. Our home was a reflection of our union. His collection of contemporary art hung on the walls next to my garden sketches and herbariums of rare plants. Mornings smelled of freshly ground coffee and his expensive vetiver-tinged cologne. Evenings, of wine and dinner, which we cooked together, laughing and jostling in our large kitchen. I designed gardens where other people would raise their children and retire. He negotiated deals that reshaped the financial landscape. We were a strong, beautiful couple. We were a team. At least, I thought so. I was so absorbed in tending the visible part of our garden that I didn't notice how deep below the surface, the roots were beginning to rot. It all started quietly, like a disease that goes unnoticed for a long time. Sebastian received another promotion. He became a partner at his firm. It was a huge victory, a pinnacle he'd worked so hard to achieve. We celebrated in style, throwing a party in our apartment. He was over the moon, and I was happy for him. The new position brought not only money and status, but also a new level of responsibility. His workdays became irregular. He'd leave before I woke up and return after I'd already gone to bed. Our dinners together became a rarity. "Sorry, my love," he'd text. "I'm slammed. An important deal. As soon as this is over, I'm yours for a whole month." I understood. I supported him. I left him dinner in the oven and sweet notes on his pillow. I told myself it was temporary. That this was the price of great success. Then a new name appeared in his vocabulary, Isabelle. A young, ambitious analyst assigned to his team. Isabelle is a genius. She sees numbers like music. Isabelle and I found a flaw in our competitors' defenses today. It was brilliant. At first, I was happy he had such a talented assistant. He began traveling more often on business. London, New York, Hong Kong. Previously, he always brought me thoughtful gifts, something to remind me of those places. Now he made do with standard duty-free souvenirs. His calls became shorter. He sounded tired, distracted. He asked less and less about my work, about my projects. The conversation revolved mainly around his work. The phone became an extension of his hand. He never let it go, even at his desk. He was constantly typing, a slight smile playing across his face. "Work chat," he would say in response to my questioning glance. Isabelle made another caustic joke about our boss. One night, I woke up thirsty. He wasn't there. I found him in his office. He was sitting in the dark, his face illuminated only by the screen of his phone. He wasn't working. He was texting. Hearing my footsteps, he winced and quickly turned off the screen. "Can't sleep?" he asked, too cheerfully. "And you?" "Just checking the Asian stock exchange rates." Insomnia. It was the first outright lie I felt on my skin. It hung in the air, cold and sticky, like a spider web. I said nothing. I went back to bed, but couldn't fall asleep for a long time, listening to the silence and sensing the first, barely noticeable, but poisonous weed sprouting in our perfect garden. The next 6 months felt like a slow descent into twilight. The sun in our lives dwindled. Sebastian grew distant. He was physically close, but his thoughts were elsewhere. Our intimacy, once so easy and natural, became strained. He increasingly cited fatigue. Our conversations became superficial. We talked about the weather, the news, the little things of everyday life. We stopped talking about what mattered. About us. I tried to break through this wall. I arranged romantic dinners, bought theater tickets, suggested weekend getaways. He agreed, but I could tell he was doing it out of a sense of duty. He sat across from me, smiling, but his eyes remained empty. He was with me, but at the same time, he wasn't there. I began to feel invisible. My successes, my problems, all of it seemed to pass him by. One day, I won a prestigious competition for the best private garden design. I called him to share my joy. "Oh, great, honey. Congratulations. Listen, I'm in a meeting right now, I'll call you later," he said and hung up. He never called back. That evening, he didn't even remember. The doubts I'd been pushing away for so long began to take root. I began to notice little things I wouldn't have noticed before. A new, expensive tie I'd never given him. A sudden interest in a trendy underground musician he'd previously despised. He said it was Isabel who enlightened him. He became more attentive to his appearance. He joined a gym and started buying expensive clothes. "You have to live up to your partner's status," he explained. But I could see he wasn't doing it for me. When we went out together, he dressed as usual. But when he went to a business dinner, he dressed as if he were going on a first date. One evening, we were invited to dinner at our friend's house. Sebastian said he'd be late at work and would come straight there. I arrived alone. I caught sympathetic glances all evening. Our friend Chloe pulled me aside. "Amelia, is everything okay?" she asked cautiously. "It's just, last week, I saw Sebastian at the bar at the Hotel Costas. He wasn't alone. With a young brunette. I thought maybe it was work-related." My heart sank. The Hotel Costas is an expensive, fashionable place, not one for business meetings. "Yes, it's his colleague, Isabel," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "They're working on a complicated project right now." Chloe looked at me doubtfully, but said nothing more. Sebastian never showed up for that dinner, sending a message saying the meeting ran into the night. I returned home and visited his work-related social media page for the first time. Among his new friends was her. Isabel. Beautiful, sharp, with a predatory smile and the look of a winner. Her page contained several photos from corporate events. In one of them, she and Sebastian were standing close. Too close. His arm was on her waist. They weren't looking at the camera. They were looking at each other. And there was something more than just a business relationship in their gazes. I closed the laptop. My hands went cold. It wasn't suspicion anymore. It was almost knowledge. The facade of our perfect home was covered in deep, ugly cracks, and I could no longer pretend not to notice them. The climax came on our 10th anniversary. I'd been preparing for this day for weeks. I'd booked a table at Le Jules Verne, the restaurant on the Eiffel Tower where he proposed. I'd bought a new dress. I wanted to recapture the magic, shake things up, remind him of who we once were. In the morning, he kissed me and handed me a velvet box. Inside was a necklace. Beautiful, expensive, but completely bland. The kind you could buy at any jewelry store at the last minute. He didn't even bother to pick out anything special. "Happy anniversary, my love," he said. "Do you remember what night it is?" I asked, my heart sinking. He frowned. "Evening? Thursday." "What?" He'd forgotten. He'd forgotten about our anniversary. About our restaurant. About everything. Nothing, I said, feeling my insides drop. He left for work, promising not to be late. I canceled the restaurant reservation. I took off my dress, put on old jeans and a sweater. I sat in the living room and stared into space. It was over. I knew it, but I needed proof. Not for myself. For him. So he couldn't lie anymore. I picked up my laptop. I knew his email password, he never changed it, and the title of our favorite song. I'd never stooped to that level, finding it humiliating. But now all boundaries were erased. I went in. There was a separate folder called Project X. Inside was their correspondence. Not hundreds, but thousands of emails. From the past year. It was all there. Their first flirtatious messages. Plans for secret meetings. Discussions about me. Amelia doesn't suspect a thing. She's become so boring and predictable. Intimate photos. Declarations of love. They planned a vacation together. They discussed his divorce with me. He wrote to her that the moment just needed to be right, that he would try to make it as painless as possible for Amelia. I read, and the world around me disintegrated into pixels. It was physically painful, as if my chest had been cut open without anesthesia. The man writing these letters wasn't my husband. He was some alien, cruel, cynical monster. And the last straw was the hotel bill that arrived in the mail. The George verses. The room was booked for that night. The night of our anniversary. In Sebastian's name. An icy rage overwhelmed me. I no longer felt pain. Only the desire to look him in the eyes. I got dressed, called a taxi, and went to the George verses. I didn't know what to say. I was simply on autopilot. The concierge didn't want to tell me my room number, but a wad of euros solved that problem. I took the elevator up. I stood outside their door, my heart still. There was silence inside. I knocked. She opened the door. Isabel. She was wearing a silk robe, her hair damp from the shower. She looked at me without surprise, with a hint of disdain. Amelia, she said, as if we were old acquaintances. I thought you'd show up sooner. He emerged from the depths of the room. Sebastian. He was wearing the same robe. When he saw me, he froze. His expression wasn't just one of fear. It was pure terror. Amelia. What are you doing here? He stammered. I didn't answer. I just looked at him. At my husband. At the man to whom I'd given 10 years of my life. And then I took off my wedding ring, the very one he'd put on my finger in Provence, and threw it on the carpet. It fell with a dull, pitiful thud. I turned and left. I didn't cry. The tears would come later. Now inside me there was only a scorched, dead garden. I don't remember how I got home. I sat on the floor in our living room until the early morning. When dawn broke, I got up and started packing. Not everything. Just the bare essentials. Clothes, books, my tools, and sketches. I moved like a robot. There was a deafening emptiness inside. I called Chloe. She arrived 20 minutes later, without asking any questions. She simply hugged me and helped me carry out my suitcases. I moved in with her. The first month was hell. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep. I lost 10 kilos. The pain was physical. It broke my ribs, suffocated me at night. I woke up from nightmares in which I saw his face in the doorway of that room over and over again. Sebastian tried to break through. He called, sent hundreds of messages, waited outside Chloe's building. I didn't answer. I didn't want to see him, didn't want to hear him. What could he say? His words turned to dust. One day, Chloe handed me his letter. I didn't want to read it, but she insisted. You need to know what you're dealing with, she said. It was 12 pages, written in cramped handwriting. 12 pages of excuses, self-flagellation, and pleas for forgiveness. He wrote that it was an obsession, that he was lost, that fame and money had gone to his head. He wrote that Isabel was just a mirror in which he saw his ego, but that he had always loved only me. He wrote that it was over with her, that he had fired her, that he would do anything to get me back. He begged for another chance. I read that letter and felt nothing. No pity, no anger. Only cold detachment. The man who wrote it was a stranger to me. He spoke of love, but he had no idea what it was. Love isn't just words. This is loyalty. This is respect. This is protection. And he trampled all of that. I realized I couldn't forgive him. It wasn't about cheating as a physical act. It was about betrayal. About the lies that lasted for over a year. He looked me in the eyes, slept with me, told me he loved me, while behind my back he was building another life. He turned our 10 years into a fake. He devalued our memories. He stole not only my present but my past as well. I hired a lawyer. The best, the toughest I could find. I sent Sebastian a single message: "My lawyer will contact yours. Don't write to me anymore." Divorce proceedings began. Divorce is an ugly, humiliating process. It's an autopsy performed on your still living, bleeding life. Everything shared, personal, and intimate becomes a subject for haggling and division. The house, the car, the bank accounts, even that silly vinyl record collection. Sebastian's lawyers tried to make it look like I was a vengeful, resentful woman out to ruin him. My lawyer, Madame Legrand, was a real shark. She calmly dealt with the facts, evidence of his infidelity, his lies. We had to meet several times in the lawyers' offices. It was torture. Sitting in the same room with the man who meant everything to you, discussing through intermediaries who would get the coffee table. He tried to look me in the eye, his gaze full of pleading. I didn't look at him. I looked at Madame Legrand, at my hands, out the window, anywhere but at him. The most painful part was dividing the apartment. Our house. I had to go back there to collect the remaining things. He had left specifically to avoid me. I walked through the empty rooms, and every object screamed of the past. There was the chair where I read aloud to him. There was the wall where our wedding photo hung. Now there was an empty space. I found a box in his office. It contained all my gifts to him over the years, all our photographs, a dried rose from our first date. He had saved everything. Next to it lay a folder of documents. It was the plans for the house he secretly bought for us in Normandy, by the sea. He wanted to give it to me for our 10th anniversary. The same anniversary he spent with another woman. At that moment, I broke down. I sat on the floor and burst into tears. I wasn't crying for him. I cried for us. For the us that was no more. For the future he stole from us. I cried for the fact that even the most beautiful gardens can perish if the gardener turns traitor. The process lasted almost a year. It was a year of hell. But gradually, very slowly, I began to come to my senses. I threw myself into my work. I took on a new, ambitious project, the renovation of an old, abandoned park on the outskirts of Paris. I worked until I was exhausted, pouring all my pain, all my rage, all my hope into this neglected land. I uprooted old, diseased trees, cleared weeds, laid new paths. I created new life from the ruins. The day before the final court hearing, where our divorce would be made official, he called Chloe. He begged her to talk me into a last meeting. Not with the lawyers present. Just the two of us. To talk. I didn't want to. But Chloe said, "Maybe you need this. To put this all behind you." I agreed. We met in a small CAF on the Ile St. Louis. A neutral place where we had no shared memories. He had aged over the past year. He'd lost weight, his hair was graying. His former polished confidence was gone. He looked tired and broken. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly. We ordered coffee. The silence was heavy. I wanted to apologize, he began, looking at his hands. Not for you coming back. I know that's impossible. But just so you know, I'm sorry for everything. For every day of lies. For every pain I caused you. For ruining our lives. I have no excuse. I was a weak, vain idiot who chased a shiny imitation while holding the real thing in his hands. He looked up at me. Tears welled in his eyes. Every day I wake up and fall asleep thinking about what I've done. I didn't just lose my wife. I lost my best friend. I lost my compass. And now I'm simply lost. I listened to him, and for the first time this year, I felt something akin to pity. Not for him, but for both of us. For what we'd become. I want to say something too, I replied, my voice even. I hated you for a long time. That hatred burned me from the inside. But I don't want to feel it anymore. I forgive you, Sebastian. Not for you. For myself. So that I can move on with my life without carrying this burden around with me. I stood up. Goodbye, I said. Amelia, he called after me. Be happy. You deserve it more than anyone. I nodded and left the CAF without looking back. That was our last meeting. The end had been set. Chapter 8, A New Landscape. The next day, the court officially dissolved our marriage. I walked out of the courthouse onto the street, and the bright spring sun hit me in the face. I took a deep breath. I was free. It wasn't that joyful, intoxicating freedom. It was a quiet, slightly bitter freedom. The freedom of a man who has survived a shipwreck and now stands alone on a desert island. All around are the wreckage of the past, but ahead lies a whole new world to explore. 2 more years passed. I didn't return to our apartment. I sold my share and bought a small studio with a terrace in Montmartre. On this terrace, I created my own garden. The flowers growing there weren't perfect, symmetrical ones. There were wild grasses, sturdy succulents, vines that clung to the walls. It was an imperfect but living, real garden. My garden. My park on the outskirts of town opened. It became a favorite spot for the neighborhood residents. I often went there and watched children playing on the lawns, elderly couples strolling along the paths I designed. I created something beautiful in the place of neglect. And it healed me. I never entered into another serious relationship. I wasn't ready. The wounds healed, but the scars remained. I learned to live alone. And I loved it. I worked a lot, traveled alone, met with friends. I was rediscovering myself. Myself without him. Sometimes I think about Sebastian. I heard he left Paris and is working somewhere in Asia. The hatred is gone. There's only a quiet sadness about what could have been, and gratitude for the lesson. It taught me the most important thing. Even the most beautiful garden can perish. But a new one can always take its place. It will be different. Not better and not worse. Just different. And no one can destroy it, because now I know that the main gardener in my life is myself.